Gentlemen, Dr. Vella here. I want to spend a little bit of time in this screencast talking about how to organize longer papers. You are writing a 2,500 word essay that's going to end up being somewhere around 8 to 9 pages, and I want to give you some suggestions about how to organize these kinds of papers. This video is a prelude to the next one, which is about the thesis and outline assignment, but you should definitely be watching this one first, because this is where I'm going to give you some ideas for how to think about your outline before you actually try to put it together. Okay, so let me start by discussing what I call the worst case scenario for a research paper. The worst case. Okay? The worst case scenario is that you end up with a Schaeffer Method type paper where the only logical relationship among all your different claims is conjunctions, namely and. So a series of conjunctions. And you guys have all heard the stereotypical Schaeffer Method paper, which is just, the author uses diction and imagery and figurative language and something else, where it's just a series of ands, a bunch of conjunctions, okay? The problem with this kind of a paper, in a longer paper, is that your reader's going to get bored by it, because you're not showing the relationship. So this kind of a paper fails to show the relationship among the various claims. So you might say there's diction and imagery and figurative language, but you're not really saying how diction and imagery fit together, or how imagery and figurative language fit together, or whatever your conjunctions may be. So this kind of a Schaeffer Method paper really can't be much longer than a 5-paragraph essay, because after that your reader just starts to demand more from you. Okay? So we want to avoid a paper that is just a series of conjunctions. What we're going to instead aim for, what our best case scenario is that the paper is a logical progression of ideas. Okay? A logical progression, which means that instead of just getting a series, there is A and B and C and D, right? That's the worst case scenario. That's where we're just listing a whole bunch of different interesting things we found, but we're not relating them. The logical progression, guys, the idea here is that you start with foundational claims, what are called foundational or prior claims. And then you progress to deeper claims. Okay? So when you're doing this, you're actually relating the several parts of your paper, the several main ideas or subheadings in your paper. So the goal here is twofold. First of all, to show the relationships among your various topics, all right? You're showing the relationships among the various topics, and secondly, you're showing a progression of argument. As we go further in your paper, the argument goes deeper. Okay? So, how do we structure this? the best way to think about this, guys, so the worst case scenario I explained as a series of ands, right? A series of conjunctions. The ideal scenario is a series of what are called conditionals. So I'm going to say here, use conditionals rather than conjunctions. And the most important conditional to understand is modus ponens. And that's just the Latin term for the way of power, but it really is just the statement if then. If P, then Q. Actually, let me write the then there. Sorry, I used the logical symbol there. If P, then Q. Let me write that again. If P, then Q. Okay, this is not merely a conjunction. I am not simply saying P and Q are true. That would be a conjunction, P and Q. What I'm saying here, though, is if P is true, then Q must be true. Okay? So in this kind of a scenario, P is the prior claim. And Q is what's called the consequent claim. So P is what is established, and then Q is what follows from it. All right? So the way I want you to think about organizing this paper is as a series of logical conditionals. A series of if P, then Q. If Q, then R. If R, then S. When you are making progressions like that, that is how you're deepening an argument, right? So, let me just say again, the worst case is where you have P and Q and R and S, and you go so on. The best case is P, then Q, then R, then S. Okay? So, what you need to be thinking about right now are which of your claims are prior to other claims. Which of your claims are the foundational ones? Which of your claims does your reader need to hear first before they hear anything else from you? Okay? So when you're making your thesis and outline and you're organizing your 7 to 10 body paragraphs, you need that order to reflect the logical progression of ideas. The worst case scenario, gentlemen, is if you give me 7 body paragraphs and I could just shuffle the order. I could read paragraph 7 first, I could read paragraph 5 next, then I could read paragraph 1. Doesn't even matter what order it's in. That is a worst case scenario for a long paper. Because the last thing you want your reader to do is feel like they are not getting deeper into a subject, that they're just jumping around. Okay? All right. So that's my first main point about paper organization. Let me give you one major idea about how to structure these kinds of longer papers. Okay? We know that we have 8 to 9 pages we need to write. Now, what I'm going to recommend to you is that you try to determine what is your number of either main ideas, your number of topics, or your number of themes that you're going to discuss. And ideally, in a paper of this length, you're not going to be dealing with fewer than 2 main ideas or topics. And you're also not going to be dealing with more than 4. If you've got more than 4 main topics or main ideas, that means each of your topics is only getting 2 pages. That's going to seem way underdeveloped. Okay? If you have fewer than 2 main topics, that means you have 1 topic and the whole paper is going to be on that topic. That's not ideal either. Okay? So, here's what I suggest. All right, I suggest 3 different scenarios. So when we think about the 8 to 9 page paper, I want you to think about 3 different possible ways of organizing this. The first way to organize it is to basically organize it as 2 4-page papers. If you have 2 main ideas that you know you're going to discuss, maybe it's 2 authors or 2 themes or 2 main ideas. If you have 2 main ideas you're discussing, you can basically write 2 4-page papers and then work on the transitions and the coherence of those 2 papers to make them fit seamlessly as one longer one. But basically, you're operating with 2 4-pagers. If you have 3 main ideas, then you're basically writing 3 3-page papers. And lastly, if you have 4 main ideas, you are writing roughly 4 2-page papers. Okay? Now, one reason I like using this kind of a model to help you guys get organized is that you already know how to write a 2-page paper, a 3-page paper, and a 4-page paper. You might not be as comfortable with writing a paper that's 8 or 9 pages, but I know that you're comfortable with writing 2, 3, and 4-page papers. So this is one way you can organize your thoughts. Try to think about how many different main ideas or topics you have. And then based on that, try to divide up your paper into 2, 3, or 4 major sections. And then the task as you write that paper is to make sure that your paper doesn't feel like 2 or 3 separate papers that have just been stapled together. You want a unified and coherent project, which means you'll work on transition sentences, you'll work on coherence, you'll work on transitions between your topics, but that you are still ultimately writing several shorter papers and finding a way to combine those. Okay? So, that is my main recommendation for how to think about this structure. A lot of students feel like they hit a writer's block, and it's just because they're unfamiliar with how to organize a longer paper. So here's the way we do it. We organize the longer paper by building on what we already know. And we already know how to do the 2, 3, and 4-page paper. So let's build on that knowledge and use what we know there to adapt that writing skill to the longer paper. Okay? So, 2 main ideas I tried to illustrate here. I tried to illustrate the concept of a logical progression of ideas in your paper, and I tried to illustrate the concept of a topic-based or theme-based structure. All right? Notice, the last thing I'll say here is that when you're organizing your 2, 3, or 4 short papers in here, the one that comes first is the one that is logically prior, right? I don't want you to write 2 4-page papers and either one of them could go first. That's not ideal. The one that should go first is the one that is foundational and prior. Likewise, if you're doing 3 of these, the first one should be the one that is foundational, the second one goes deeper than that, and the third one goes even deeper than that. Okay? So, these 2 comments, or these 2 main points I'm making about structure and organization, both fit together. Okay? So, that's all I wanted to say here. The follow-up screencast will be more specifically about how to complete the thesis and outline assignment. I wish you guys luck with this. I know this is challenging, but I think that with these tools and skills, you guys will have great success in putting together these research papers. All right? This is Dr. Vella signing out.